Hello and welcome back to Unearth the Past, a family history and genealogy podcast that delves into the lives of interesting people. I'm Dr. Michala Hulme, historian and genealogist, and I've been researching family trees for the past 25 years. Today I am joined by one of my favourite people. Lisa Morton is the founder of Roland Dransfield, an award-winning Manchester and London-based PR agency. A strong and resilient force in business, she has spent decades helping brands tell their stories while building a reputation as a leader in her field. She is also the host of the brilliant podcast We Built This City, where she celebrates the lives of Mancunians who have left their mark. But today it's Lisa's turn in the hot seat as we explore hidden family tales and fascinating ancestors. Lisa Morton, welcome to the podcast. Lisa, thank you so much, by the way, for coming on my podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm honoured. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, we met, didn't we, through a mutual friend. I've known of you for years, obviously, because this is Miss Manchester, or Mrs. Manchester, as you probably would prefer to be. Ms. Manchester, as it likes to be called, because nothing happens in Manchester, really, that she doesn't know about or hasn't gone through Lisa, through your brilliant company, Roland Dransfield. Can you just tell me then, how did that start? So take me back to the 90s.
Yeah.
I was probably wearing naff. Do you remember naff? Joe Bloggs.
Yeah.
Them were the days.
They were the days. Grolsch bottle tops on my Doc Martens.
Yes.
I got into PR because I turned down a job in advertising in London because there were no flat vowels and they were all smoking Marlboro Lights, menthols. And I was like, I don't belong here. My mum was livid and I turned down what was a 14 grand a year job then and came back to Manchester, and so got my first job in PR in Manchester on Salford Crescent. And then worked for a couple of agencies, but I always wanted to have my own business. So pretty early on in my career, I started Roland Dransfield up and named Roland Dransfield's actually the name of my godfather, and he was my dad's boss. And he found my dad under his car. He was alive. He was mending his car. He was a mechanic. He was a regular guy that worked on Roland's cars, who was rags to riches in Salford in engineering, and he liked my dad and my dad's work ethic so much that he offered Dad a job. And Roland basically changed our life because my dad had an opportunity then that we all benefited from, and that's why I named the business after Roland Dransfield, because he also set me up in my first business when I was 8, which was car washing. And he went, go out and clean these cars with this bucket and this sponge, come back, and if you can pay me for the bucket and the sponge, you're in profit. If not, you will owe me some more next week. And I had that car wash. I was in profit. I don't know what I had to pay him back, I can't remember. But I had that car washing around till I was 15. I fell in love with shoes and worked in a shoe shop.
This leads, I think, quite nicely, actually, onto your podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So Lisa has the most amazing podcast, by the way. It's called We Built This City. Yeah. If you get a chance, please go and listen to it. It's absolutely fabulous. She's had some amazing guests on. But this leads quite nicely into your Manchester, Salford roots. You had the chance to go and work in London, but you stayed in Manchester. What is it about Manchester that keeps you here and that you love so much?
Well, I think it's a sense of community. I feel here that, if you've got nothing, you'll get a handout and you'll get help. And if you've got something, you'll also get a handout and you'll get help because people want to see you well. So want to see you do well. So I don't know. I mean, community was everything to me growing up. Felt incredibly loved, supported. Got amazing memories of being a kid in Salford. I have fulfilled my love of travel. I mean, I've travelled a lot as a student and I've travelled a lot in my adult life. So but yeah, something keeps bringing me back home, and Manchester has been so good to me and good to my family that I feel it is my family here. Yeah.
Talk to me about growing up. What was it like growing up for you in Salford?
Yeah.
For those that don't know Salford, how would you describe it for our American audience?
Well, so salt of the earth, if that's an expression that goes across the pond. Community all day long. Everyone was your uncle or your auntie, whether they were or not.
Related or
Uncle
not.
Arthur, Auntie Beryl. And yeah, I mean, literally, the back doors were open, and if you needed it, regularly people would borrow a cup of sugar or some butter. Or my mum was a bit of a snob. I think she saw herself, so she didn't like the door open. We had to have our door closed, so people had to knock, because otherwise, like, you would just be in a house and people would just walk into your house.
Yeah.
But we had, I don't know, we just had an amazing childhood. I lived 2 doors from the school that I went to, so I set up a business from being really young, just like selling stuff and flogging stuff to school as the parents came past. Table sales. Uncle Arthur grew lettuces and he gave me the ones that weren't he didn't want to eat, and I made lettuce butties and flogged them. So it's a really loving, wonderful, warm community where everyone looked out for each other.
Should we delve into your family tree?
Yes,
Are you
please.
ready? I thought normally would start on your dad's side, your paternal side. But I thought, should we start on your mum's side? And there is a reason for this. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell me about May, your grandmother?
So May Mansfield, married to Jim Mansfield, James, who we never called Gran and Grandad because they, for the early part of my life, they were living in Bahrain. My granddad, Jim, was one of the first British engineers in Bahrain. He went out having no idea where he was going. So it was May and Jim. They didn't want us to call them Gran and Grandad. And it was only really, she just made to us. But then I kind of knew that she'd been adopted. But then we never, back in the day, you never asked questions. And I know my mum didn't ever ask any questions. So we knew, so I still don't know if she was named May after she was adopted or whether that was her name before. What I will tell you is that May was the most incredible woman. She was so vibrant, so full of life. And she actually, bless her, died when she had a heart attack dancing around the living room.
Wow.
Yeah, and she wasn't very old. And it broke my heart. I think I was 21. And even though we'd not had our whole childhood with her because they came back to the UK probably when I was about 11 or 12. Yeah, she was an amazing woman. So, but we just don't know any of her background at all.
So, because she was adopted and because she was born in 1916, she was born at a time before adoption was legalised. So adoption wasn't legalised until 1926, which means that we don't have the records that we have sort of post 1926. So the only way I could find out anything else about May was through DNA. And your mum, didn't she, took a DNA test, which was quite funny, I imagine, getting us to spit in the tube.
Oh my God, honestly. Yes.
Yeah. But she did. And the reason that we got your mum to do it is because obviously she is closer to May because it's her mum, so the DNA would be stronger. I know you've taken a test. We're going to go through your results as well today. So May, as I said, was born in 1916. The first record that I have for May, paper record that I found, was her on the 1921 census. And on that census, she's living with Albert, which is her adopted dad. I'm sure she just thought of him as her father. And May. Would you like to see that record?
Yes, please.
So this is the 1921 census. They are living in Salford, and I don't know if you can make any of that out. I always have to apologise, Lisa, for the handwriting. It's beautiful, but it's quite hard to read.
Just says Manchester Lane. And then personal description, bacon rolling.
So that's his job.
Wow. And then employment, Seaman Meads, Manchester Warehouse. Place of work, George Hall, Manchester. Bacon rolling, wonder what that literally means.
I think
That's fabulous. And then we've got May Park, wife. So May's mum was called May.
Yeah.
36 and 6 months. Married, housewife, and she was at home at the time of the census. So then there's okay, so there's Edward Pankhurst, who's a boarder in the house. Who's a window cleaner. Alfred Edwards, who was another boarder, motor driver. And then May Park, who was 4 years, 9 months. And then what's it say? It says single crossed out and then birth.
Let me have a look.
Can't read what that says.
Yeah, go on. So at the bottom is your grandmother May.
Yeah.
She is 4 years old and 9 months at the time of the census. She's a female. Both parents are alive. So this is the first census that actually recognises if a child is an orphan or if a parent's died.
Okay.
So both parents are alive. She was born Birch Street, Manchester. But we know, because I've tried to find her birth certificate, that she wasn't born on Birch Street. So what a job this was. And I think we met up, didn't we, halfway through the research. Remember, in a garden centre?
Yes.
And you said to me, how am I getting on? So your mum's obviously taken this DNA test.
Yeah.
What I then had to do was focus on your mum's side, May's side, and have a look at all her DNA matches. That's everybody that shares DNA with your mum on that side, basically. Then what we do, we put those into groups. And from those groups, we're trying to look for a name. Who is it that they all share DNA with? What is that common ancestor? And all the time, the surname that kept coming up, which I think I told you, was Allsop. Allsop. So I knew when I'd done the research that you were related to a couple who were born in the 1830s in Worcestershire called Alan Allsop and his wife, Matilda Sheen. Looking at their ages, May would be their great-grandchild.
Right.
So I needed to look at all their children and think who was old enough, who came through Manchester in 1916, who's May's mum or dad, because we didn't know at that point what side of the tree it was on. And then I got a little breakthrough, and I'm going to show you this. So this is May's actual birth certificate.
No. Oh, wow. So the 15th of November 1916, Lloyd Street, Moss Side. So that's where she was born.
Yeah.
May Parks, girl. Name and maiden surname of mother, Beatrice Ellen Allsop, of no occupation. And then signature, description, residence of informants. So Beatrice Allsop, mother. So that was her mum, Beatrice Ellen Allsop.
Yeah. And if you look, it tells you where the mum lived.
Oh, underneath, sorry, Ferny Hill, Tewkesbury. So how on earth has May made it up to Manchester?
May's mum, Beatrice Ellen Allsop, was the daughter of Charles Allsop and Mary Ann Wardley. She was born on the 10th of December 1888 at Cambridge Farm, Burts Morton, Worcestershire. After leaving school, Beatrice found employment as a domestic servant. The 1911 census reveals that she had left Burts Morton and had travelled over 114 miles north to Fairfield, Derbyshire, where she was in the employment of Frank Holland Harrop, a life assurance superintendent from Manchester. What happened to Beatrice in the next 5 years is not clear. However, we do know that by the summer of 1916, she was alone, pregnant and residing in Manchester. A search of the address where Beatrice gave birth to May reveals that 174 Lloyd Street, Moss Side, was a private nursing home that catered for pregnant women. It's extremely doubtful that on Beatrice's wage she would have been able to afford a private nursing home. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that she's called May and that Parks is her middle name. I think the couple, Albert and May, must have known of this lady being pregnant, must have known of this child coming into the world. They've been married a couple of years by this point. They married in 1914. They've not got a child. So I think that she's let them call the child May, after May, and also put Parks in the middle name.
So you think it was agreed in advance of her mum actually giving birth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because it's too much of a coincidence. Why would you have the middle name Parks?
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing in the DNA to suggest that Albert Parks is her biological father. So I don't think that's the case. I think that they knew and, you know, they wanted a child and this is how it's come about. But what's nice is that on every record from there, there's no evidence whatsoever that she's even been adopted. I wouldn't have known had I couldn't find the birth certificate. That was the first clue. But obviously then you told me, didn't you, that she'd been adopted.
And I know that May was always said that she was loved by her mum and dad. I mean, she had a wonderful childhood. So that's obviously indicative of how they felt about her.
How will your mum react when you say we've found she's
I think she'll be absolutely fascinated, because it was to know. None of us had any idea. It was just never discussed.
Yeah. We're going to keep going down the Allsop line now, if that's all right.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So as I mentioned to you right at the beginning, I knew from the DNA that you are descended from Alan Allsop and Matilda Sheen, which you are. We've mentioned that already, that Beatrice's, you've gone through the family tree and mentioned that Beatrice's dad, who is your great-great-grandfather, is a guy called Charles Stephen Allsop. He was born on the 4th of March, 1866. In 1888, he marries your great-great-grandmother, and I have their marriage certificate, if you would like to see it, from 1888.
Wow.
So I'm just going to pass you that over. I don't know if you can make any of that out.
So on the 30th October 1888, Charles Allsop married Anne Mary Wardley. Gosh, he was 22, she is 21. He was a labourer, and they're both living in Worcester. And then father's name and surname, so Alan Allsop, and then that's Enoch Wardley, that's an unusual name. Labourer and farmer.
Would you like to see a picture of them?
Oh my gosh, yes, I really would. Oh no, what's this? I thought they were just like, these are just generally. Oh wow, so who's that? That's
Charles.
Charles. So that's my great
yes
granddad. Wow, look at him in his suit on a deck chair in the middle of a field. That's amazing. Oh my god, I'm not like to know. That's amazing.
And then would you like to see? Go on, I'll take that one.
Who's this then?
So this is his wife. This is Mary Ann Wardley.
Thank you.
Go on, I'll take that one. Thank you very much.
Wow, what an outfit. I mean, gosh, that's actually incredible.
I'm going to keep going back if that's okay. We're going to keep cracking on. So by 1911, the couple had given birth to 9 children, with 2 sadly dying before they reached adulthood. Charles died. So this is Charles. Mm-hmm. Charles died in 1929. His parents, as we've already mentioned, are Alan Allsop and Matilda Sheen. Matilda Sheen would be your great-great-great-grandmother. And that is her.
No way.
Yeah, do you want to have a look?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, she's stylish.
She is, isn't she?
Really stylish.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Thank you very much.
She's got a nice face.
She's got a friendly face.
She's got a lovely face. The great-great-grandma, not so much. She looks
quite stern.
That's more like I would think of me.
Yeah. Now, I've managed to trace the Allsops all the way back to the 18th century, and they remain in the Worcestershire area, so they don't really move. Matilda Sheen's parents, who we've looked at here, would be your 4 times great-grandparents. They are Joseph Sheen and Charlotte Vine. Joseph, he was a farm labourer. On the 1861 census, the family are living in Worcestershire. On the census is Joseph, Charlotte, daughters Winifred and Selina Sheen. I quite like that name.
It's a nice name.
Yeah.
And how do you spell Sheen? How's that spelled?
S-H-E-E-N.
Yeah.
Now, a month after this census was taken, I find another record that relates to the Sheen family, which I'm going to show you now. So this is from June of 1861.
Oh my goodness me, so I'm looking. Wow, hang on.
Feel free to zoom in.
Where? So this is. Oh wow, districts of New York, Port of New York. So this is from a ship from Liverpool to New York. Wow.
On the 16th of May, 1861, Lisa's 4 times great-grandparents, Joseph Sheen and Charlotte Vine, boarded the Monarch of the Sea in Liverpool, bound for New York. They were part of a determined group of Mormons, leaving behind their lives in Britain, chasing the promise of a fresh start in the rugged landscape of Utah. The Monarch of the Sea was old and weathered, unfit for the storms that would soon batter it. Remarkably, it survived the journey to New York, though it was doomed to sink on its return voyage. Packed into steerage, the cheapest and most crowded part of the ship, Joseph and Charlotte endured a gruelling 34-day voyage. The grim reality of sea travel would claim 9 lives along the way. When the couple finally set foot in New York on the 19th of June 1861, their journey had only just begun. The trek from New York to Utah was long, perilous, and shadowed by the American Civil War. From New York, the group quietly travelled up the Hudson River to Albany and then boarded a train to Omaha, Nebraska. Silence was their shield as they passed through a nation divided by war, with Mormon settlers cautious to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. On the 1st of July 1861, the group reached Florence, Nebraska, the final staging ground for their overland journey. They rested for 5 days, receiving wagons and oxen to carry them across the harsh plains. Then, on the 7th of July, their 10-week journey to Salt Lake City began. The path ahead was unforgiving. Exhaustion, extreme weather, and illness stalked their every step. Fires swept through the plains, destroying the grass their oxen needed for survival. Rumours of soldiers sent to stop Mormon settlers and encounters with hostile native tribes only added to the tension. For 5 weeks, Joseph and Charlotte trudged through the unrelenting wilderness of Nebraska, finally arriving at Fort Laramie, Wyoming, their first trading post. But tragedy struck on the 12th of August 1861. In the shadow of Fort Laramie's rugged frontier, Charlotte fell ill and passed away, leaving Joseph to carry on without her. Heartbroken but resolute, Joseph continued west with the convoy. The group navigated the treacherous Rocky Mountains, passing through Fort Bridger by the end of August. On the 2nd of September 1861, after months of hardship, Joseph and the Mormon pioneers finally reached Salt Lake City. Joseph settles in Salt Lake City, and in 1862 he remarries a lady called Catherine McGregor McNair. We do know that he does briefly return to the UK for a visit, and I have him on the 1971 census. He's living with your great-great-grandparents in Worcestershire. But what's quite funny, on the record, he's put he's a widower. So he's basically said that his second wife has died. But that's not quite the case.
Oh.
She's still very much alive. But she has written a memoir.
No.
And in her memoir, she states that Joseph was a gambler. And when her son took over her possessions, he left. Yeah, he left her high and dry.
Wow.
So we know that he comes back over here for a short time, but then he does go back over to Utah. He dies in Utah in 1883. Joseph and Charlotte Sheen weren't the first in Lisa's family to make the perilous journey from Worcestershire to Utah. 5 years earlier, in 1856, Joseph's brother James Sheen, along with his wife Maria and their children, set out on the same path. James's journey was funded by the Perpetual Emigrating Fund, the PEF, a lifeline for impoverished Mormon converts desperate to join their fellow believers in Utah. The PEF offered financial assistance for the journey, with the promise that settlers would repay the loan once they had established themselves in their new home. James and his family embarked on their journey under the watchful leadership of Edmund Ellsworth, Brigham Young's son-in-law, who personally escorted the group from Liverpool on board the ship Enoch train. On board were 534 Mormon immigrants, all part of a bold new experiment, the handcart plan, Brigham Young's daring idea to reduce travel costs. Instead of relying on expensive wagons and oxen, the immigrants would pull two-wheeled wooden handcarts loaded with their belongings. Each person was permitted just 17 pounds of luggage, a weight limit that stripped their possessions to the bare essentials. The Enoch train delivered its passengers to Boston, where they continued their journey by train to Iowa. Once in Iowa, the group waited a grueling month for their handcarts to be built. On the 21st of September 1856, after months of arduous travel, James and his family camped at Fort Bridger, Wyoming, a vital waypoint on the Mormon Trail. 26th of September 1856, James and his children finally reached Utah with the rest of the surviving members of the convoy. Waiting to greet them was Brigham Young himself, accompanied by a welcoming committee offering fresh melons as a gesture of relief and hope to the weary travellers. For James, however, the journey's toll was too great. Just 3 days after arriving in Utah, he succumbed to exhaustion. So when you look at the Mormon pioneers, your family were part of the Mormon pioneers.
You joke? That's insane. I've seen Book of Mormon about half a dozen times.
Have you?
I wonder why we keep going to see it.
Oh my God.
That's incredible.
How does that make you feel, knowing that your ancestors, that you knew nothing about, by the way, before you walked in this room, were some of the early settlers, Mormon settlers in Utah?
Just mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. And to think, it would have taken so much courage and bravery back in the day to say, I'm going to go and cross the other side of the world, not knowing what is there for you, but must be driven either by, I don't know, is that seeking a better life, or I don't know what their economic circumstances were like back in the day, but also maybe just a sense of adventure. And that sense of adventure is like really alive in our family. And look at May and Jim. May, my granddad was the first British engineer in America, working on the American oil refineries. And May followed him and actually left my mum and my auntie Shirley when they were young, only for a year or so with Gran, who was their grandma. And that trip, I think, took 3 months on a boat to get to Bahrain. They didn't even know where it was. And I've got photographs of May out in Bahrain, and she was the centre of the universe out there. She was, she created a community out there on the American camp. Yeah. So I do feel that, I feel we have wanderlust in our family.
I was going to say that search for something else. And I can say this, over here, for me, I think it definitely was, they wanted a better life. They were agricultural workers, agricultural labourers. You are totally dependent on your having a good summer, whether you would survive that year or not, or whether you'd end up in a workhouse. So, I think that they were, for me, they definitely wanted that better life.
But that runs through, that definitely, look at May and Jim, and May was a real, I know that Jim would never have done that without May saying, go for it. Because they had nothing, May and Jim had nothing, and she encouraged him to go to Bahrain and create a better life for them and for my mum and my auntie Shirley, and they definitely did that. Amazing.
So you have, by the way, and I must say thank you to John and Leslie, who are your ancestors, who share DNA with you. They are distant cousins. They have done extensive research on the Mormon side of your family tree, and they've been great help. And they have provided us with some of these images.
Really?
That is the ship, by the way, that your ancestors travelled on to get to New York from Liverpool.
That's amazing.
I'm going to move on to your dad's side.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Please, yeah.
So your paternal grandparents then are Thomas William Murray and Annie Wordsworth.
Mm-hmm.
The ring a bell?
Yes.
Yeah? What can you tell us about your...
So, well, I never knew Tom because Tom died when my dad was 18, I think. And it was sad because Dad hadn't had a great relationship with his dad, but just as he was starting to build that, they started to go fishing and stuff together, and Tom died not long after that.
Right.
My nana, Annie Wordsworth, very, very close. She was like, oh my God, amazing. And that's, she's a musician, and she works at Kendall's in Manchester. She's one of the first seamstresses in Manchester. And so, yeah, an incredible woman. But I know that she had a lovely family life, but I don't know much about Tom's side of the family.
Well, should we unpick it?
Yes,
Should we go through it? So, Thomas William Murray, Tom, as you affectionately known him, was born on the 13th of January, 1907. He is the son of Thomas William Murray Sr., so they obviously kept the name, and Alice Ann Kelly, who would be your great-grandparents. Alice Ann Kelly, she was born in 1880 in Salford. She was baptised on the 25th of July, 1880, again at St Bartholomew's Church. Everybody seems to go through that church in your family. Her parents are John Kelly and Hannah Pearson. John Kelly was born, believe it or not, in Canada. And he came over here. He settled in London and then moved up north. He was in the military for a while. But what's interesting about him to me is he was a trade union guy through and through. And on the 1891 census, he's listed as the General Secretary to the Manchester and Salford Carters Union. And he was one of the founding members of that trade union. It did amalgamate later on. But throughout his life, he was a carter and wanted better conditions and better pay for carters. And it didn't necessarily mean less hours. In fact, at one point in his history, he's actually fighting for their hours not to be cut just because they're going to lose money.
So they could get overtime.
Yeah, basically they were going to lose money. But he was a real pioneer and a real fighter for the working class men of Salford, trying to get the carters better working conditions.
Wow.
And I see that in you because I've read... well, in fact, you sent me, didn't you? Before we did the podcast, you sent me a list of your values.
Yeah.
And your core values that are so central, aren't they, to you and your business? And they're just amazing. And I see that wanting something better for ordinary people in you.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
Now, I'm conscious of time and I am going to wrap this up because I've got 3 minutes and I just want to go through your DNA.
Okay.
And we've got Nina here, who's your daughter, who I'm going to see if any of these traits ring true. She's probably going to say no. So, you are 53% England and Northwestern Europe. This is your ethnicity breakdown. You are 38% Ireland. You are 8% Scotland and 1% the Netherlands. The 38% Ireland is on your dad's side.
Right.
What I want to do now, though, is just quickly have a look at your traits. So, caffeine intake.
Oh, God.
So your DNA suggests that you are likely to drink a lot more caffeine than average. Is this true?
Yes.
Yep.
I think that's in all our traits, I reckon, in the family, yeah.
Competitiveness. It says you are likely to be competitive. Desire to succeed. You are likely motivated by success. So that's at the highest one, the desire to succeed. It says, and I can't really see from here, you are unlikely to have any freckles.
Yeah, I don't think I've got any
No,
freckles.
I can't see that you've got any freckles.
My brother's got loads.
Really?
Yeah, loads.
Risk-taking. Your DNA suggests that you are a risk taker.
Yeah.
Before you go, I have to ask you one question.
Yeah.
If you could invite anybody from your family tree for dinner tonight, who would it be and why, and what would you cook them?
My goodness me. I would have the Carter activist person.
John Kelly.
John Kelly at the table. And what would I cook him? I would art direct something on a plate rather than cook.
I love it. Good old beans on toast. Yeah.
That is fascinating. I think the activism and the kind of community building is amazing. And also the fact that we've got, ancestors in Utah and America, and they, that wanderlust piece and wanting to go and find a better life it runs through our whole family. That's incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you.